Thank you, Your Grace, for the privilege of the pulpit this morning. From Luke's Gospel, Jesus said, "For where your treasure is, there shall your heart be also." How many of you here today remember the little rhyme that you learned when you were a child? It goes, "This is the church," you can say it along with me, "and this is the steeple. Open it up and see all the people." Amazing how that sort of went all around. Well, look around today. Look at all the people, even in a place where there is no steeple. But this is the church. Wherever the people of God gather, that's where the church is. And as I look out this morning, I see three different groups of people. First, there's those of us who are vested, the Archbishop, her clergy, and the musicians. Second, there's those behind me who are about to be invested in the order of the Diocese of New Westminster. There are those with medallions around their necks who are already members of the Diocese of New Westminster, and there are their fellow parishioners, people from parishes. That's a whole second group. And a third group are those members, family members and friends of those about to be invested, who you're not necessarily part of any parish or congregation, but you're here because your friend or your mother or your father or your uncle or your aunt or your grandmother or your grandfather are right here behind me to be honored by their church. And it's to you, this third group, family and friends, that I want to speak directly this morning. You must wonder what the heck we're doing here. Or even more, you must wonder what the heck you're doing here. I want to tell you some things about the church and about some of the words that you're going to hear in a few minutes. You'll hear the words ministry and service quite a few times. In the Christian church, the word ministry has a long history. It comes from about the 1st century, when the church was a minority in the Roman Empire. The word minister is the opposite of the word magister. The magister, from which we get words like magistrate and so forth, was someone who was great in things, who dealt with big, important matters. But the early Christians were not about self-aggrandizement. They were concerned with many things, small, seemingly insignificant things. Things like caring for the poor, visiting the sick, taking care of children, while the magister would put on airs to indicate how important he or she was. The minister would just humbly go about their work, not caring at all if anyone noticed. So you'll hear the word ministry today. You'll also hear a lot of technical words like warden, which does not have to do with taking care of a jail. Although, no. A warden is a senior leader in a congregation. And you'll hear some strange expressions like messy church and godly play, and other terms that may well confuse you. If you hear one of these terms described for your family member or friend today, and you don't know what it means, just ask them. You see, they have been caught up in something that's very strange in today's world. They have been engaged in the life of a community that's wider than their family and bigger than their neighborhood. It is not a secret society. It is open to anyone who wants to be part of it. It is far from a perfect group. In fact, almost every time it meets, everyone there acknowledges that we're miserable sinners. It reaches beyond itself to care for and about people in the world, particularly those whom society regularly forgets: the sick, the elderly confined to their homes, young children, and people who live on the edge of life: the poor, refugees, the homeless, and those who live with addiction and those who live with mental illness. So what is this community that we call the church all about? Well, this is the church. These are the people, right? They've all gotten engaged in at least one of three ways. And most of those who we will honor this morning have been engaged in all three ways I'm about to describe. First, they understand themselves to be children of God. It's a core teaching of the Christian way that we are not just random life forms, but are deeply connected with the divine. There is within us, we believe, each of us, a spark of divinity. You will have heard that in the psalm that we sang earlier this morning, words from almost 3,000 years ago that affirm our connection with the divine. Where can I go from your presence? Where can I flee from your spirit? The church believes that God is always with us because we human beings have been created in the image of God. And as we grow in this understanding, we find ourselves, as we grow in the understanding that we are children of God, we find ourselves drawn to love the things that God loves. Things like justice and fairness, beauty and honesty, compassion and care. We do not understand ourselves as members of the church to be defined by what we own or possess, or what others say about us, or even about what we do. We believe that we are God's beloved daughters and sons, God's children who seek to give expression to this identity through ministry, through little things that really matter. And more than that, we believe that each human being is made in the image and likeness of God, beyond their color or their ethnicity, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation. Across the globe, all people are God's beloved daughters and sons. We're God's children. Second, folks behind me understand themselves as part of the people of God. If you ask them why are they part of the church, and you may well have asked them that a few times, they'll probably begin talking about community, about how important and wonderful it is to be part of a group larger than just their family and their friends and their neighborhood. They will speak with deep affection about others that they've met in the church. They may even, if you listen long enough to their stories, recount moments of deep spiritual connection with those with whom they worship week by week. They'll tell you about parties, about fun times over meals, beautiful times of prayer with others, and poignant, even tearful times when someone they have known at the church has died and the community has gathered for a memorial service. They'll describe projects that they've done together, and for many of those being invested in the order today, they'll tell you about the church infrastructure of councils and wardens and finance and buildings and the myriad activities that help the church to gather and function. Third, they'll speak about the reign of God, about this deep conviction that Christians share that God is alive and actually up to something in the world today, and we want to be part of it. Simply put, what God is up to is making the world a place of peace and justice rather than an arena for war and conflict. And so, in small but important ways, church folks seek to make a difference. They may be involved with international projects like providing education for girls in Africa, or organizing meals for the homeless and poor. They may be involved in political protests about pipelines, or working hard to promote justice for Indigenous people in Canada. They seek to express their identity as God's children and as part of the people of God through very practical acts, demonstrating their love of God not only with what they say, but also with what they do. So, 3 things about the people who are being honored today. They understand themselves as children of God. They understand themselves as part of the people of God. And they understand themselves as participating and working for the reign of God in the world. Those honored today have been and continue to be leading lights within our community. Now, if truth be told, because of our faith tradition, many, if not all of those who are becoming members of the Order of the Diocese of New Westminster today are religiously uncomfortable with this whole thing. They're religiously uncomfortable with this whole thing. They've just been doing what followers of Jesus do, taking their part in the life of the church, growing in their awareness of being God's children, and doing what needs to be done for the healing of this planet. But we honor them today because we want to remember what it is that the whole church is called to. We're called to ministry, to live lives of service in the name of Christ. We're called to pass on the faith that has been given to us. We're called to know ourselves as beloved of God and to help each person we meet everywhere know that they too are a beloved daughter and son of God. So as you hear the citations read, and I know family members who are here under maybe a little duress are just waiting to hear your family member's citation read, can I invite you to listen to what is said about each person and to think about your own life? And you know what? You might just feel in your heart a stirring, a prompt to have a conversation, to learn why this work is so important to your friend, your aunt or your uncle, your mother or your father, or your grandparent. Because for those of us who are involved in this weird but wonderful body called the church, we find this to be the most important part of our lives. It draws us out of self-centeredness into understanding ourselves as part of God's work in the world. And that is a treasure. And as Jesus said, where your treasure is, there shall your heart be also.